Welcome to 4GQ TV. I'm a director, filmmaker, and so I enjoy talking a lot to friends all over the world about the craft of filmmaking and how each aspect benefits the whole. This time, we're delighted to have Damian Del Borrello. Hello, Damian.
Thank you for having me.
Italiano.
Italiano.
I'm from Colombia, South America.
We're cousins.
Yeah, somewhat related.
Yeah.
So it's great to see you. I understand you're in New Zealand right now.
Yeah, we're in our facility in central Auckland. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for making the time. I'm so happy to have you on. And what we inspired through 4JQ TV, or at least my efforts helping my friends in this, is to make things more accessible to folks, so that if they're looking for a career in film, they're looking for a career in TV and streaming, that they know they can look up to people like you who are so accomplished. And congratulations for the Emmy nominations, by the way, for
Oh,
the Emmy
thank you.
nomination. Yes, for a great show, Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power. I would love to start with your story, specifically. What was the first time you felt like you were interested in sound or had an affinity for it?
I mean, I I was always interested in music growing up, and so I was playing guitar and playing in bands when I was a teenager, and sort of found my way into production and producing music for the bands and for the groups that I was involved in, and all the while sort of being at university studying different things, not really knowing where my life was going to take me. But in the end, I sort of settled on like the arts focus with my degree, and started working in traditional TV. So I would be mixing documentaries and advertising, and then after a few years of doing that, went and applied for postgraduate film school or graduate film school, and from there, my career sort of really took the trajectory that brought me here. And so I think there was just the sense of curiosity around sound and wanting to learn more about how to put these types of productions together, and just a slow, steady progression. I feel very fortunate to have had that in my career, because it feels like a really solid foundation to build on. And certainly over the last 10 years, really, the accessibility to things like the editing software and picture editing software and all of that, like it really has opened the doors to a lot of up and comers. There's no real barrier. If you want to make something, you can get access to the tools to do it. Then it just becomes about like what the creative aspect is, and that's really exciting for any sort of up and coming people, just to be able to, if you have a great idea, you can jump on YouTube, you can jump on all sorts of wiki sites to get ideas of how to actually put things together. So when I started, there wasn't that. So I took a bit more of a traditional sort of pathway to
Mhm.
to get to where I am. And Certainly, once I started working in film and episodic TV, it was a matter of putting together all of the parts of the soundtrack. So there was a bit of time spent working in the dialogue department and recording ADR and understanding what that whole process is, and the sound effects side, and recording Foley and that side. And then there's also the music and the mixing, and sort of getting to the point where I could manage a team and easily sort of talk to all of the individual people about their specific jobs, and being able to help them and support them to do their best, so that as a production, as a sound team, we could then produce something great. So
Uh,
I think that has kind of put me in good stead to sort of be where I am now. And I feel very fortunate to have had that. There's a bit of luck in there. There's timing. There's being in the right place at the right time. But there's also just that sort of grounding of knowledge across the board and skills, um, which I was able to pick up along the years. Yeah.
yeah, and I think you've made a good point there. and it's one that has been echoed by different filmmakers that we've spoken to at different crafts, and that is that having a real formation and understanding the entirety of the filmmaking process, and having your cultural and an artistic background really helps define who you are, because you are a storyteller with sound. You're telling a story, and every decision that you're making is coming from an artistic mind. So sort of building up that capacity to think that way and to listen to that way is very, very important, and I'm glad that you mentioned it. Now, well, right now you're working with a great team of people at the top of the game. Let's go back once more to maybe the short films, Crystal Jam and Brawl, and what that was like back then, and then maybe how it started to evolve for you.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, those early shows were so foundational, like because there was not a lot of money, so it was like, okay, what does this film actually need? What's the most important thing for this particular project to spend the time and allocate the time, and what can we sort of allow to not be as shiny and good. So uh, and I think that's across the board with that trajectory I was talking about. It's like being able to identify the key points in the soundtrack that a story needs to be heard and to be understood.
Mhm.
And I think that's getting back to what I was saying earlier. Like, you know, maybe we didn't have the money to hire a Foley team. So, okay, what are those specific sounds in a scene that we absolutely need to hear to understand that particular story arc, or to feel that little emotional shift uh, in,
Yeah.
in in a performance that kind of then that then is okay. That's my job for the day. I have to do that. So it's really sort of like an indie kind of vibe
Mhm.
when you're in those low budget kind of projects. It's um, you can't really go, oh, here's half the sound, because that's all you can afford. You can't put a title card at the start of a film saying we only had half of the budget, so the sound is going to be good at times and bad at others.
Mhm.
The expectation is to have a good sounding track for the project. So it really teaches you how to it teaches you to focus on what's important, and then how to get the most out of those moments to then elevate the entire soundtrack to a point where it, it, it's perceived as a good sounding film.
Right. With friends, I've seen the Foley, rooms, and they might be, but the tools are sometimes the least assuming tools that you could expect in such an environment, right? And at the same time, with these tools, you make such huge contributions to a film soundtrack, obviously, but to the film as a whole. I mean, the way you perceive everything. I think it'd be good to clarify here. Most people just assume, I'm guessing that most of the sound we hear in movies is captured live while they're speaking or taking the take, and of course in even in shorts, but obviously in the huge projects that you're working in, you're building an entire soundscape, sometimes from scratch. You have the dialogue, and sometimes there's fantastic sounds in worlds that do not really exist. So you're building all this from basically nothing. So it's incredible what you do and what you do as a team. So if you could tell me maybe a few um, experiences that you remember working, because I know you've had experience as Foley editor and re-recording mixer, ADR mixer, sound editor, all these different terms that would be nice for people to learn about, and how you collaborate with such teams nowadays, and how you started learning all of these crafts.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's a lot involved in these soundtracks, and often, like, that's kind of the power of sound. Is there is that sort of assumption by the viewer that what what you're hearing is like what was recorded on the boom, which was just out of shot, you know,
Right.
and so to to play with that is actually like a really, it's quite a powerful tool, and so I guess, you know, the often we don't even use the production sound that was recorded on set, so it gets re-recorded after the fact, and so that's something that people are often very surprised at. You know, the ability of a dialogue editor and an ADR supervisor to go into the studio with an actor, get the performance out of the actor, and then cut that perfectly in sync with the mouth, um, from the close up that was shot on the day. You know, I mean, there are so many reasons why you would replace the dialogue. You know, especially on these big action sort of sequences where there's maybe they're in a snowstorm and there's on set massive wind machines that are blowing the snow into the face. Like, you need to have that on set so that the actors can perform in a way that is selling the idea that there's that action taking place. But it completely demolishes the recording of the dialogues. So you know, that's just sort of an extreme example. But it's also similar with the Foley, the sounds of the footsteps and the props being picked up, and you know, doors being opened. Um, the sound recordist on set is primarily focused on the sound of the dialogue, and doing their best to record that as cleanly and without noise and without the rustle of the costumes and all that sort of stuff, so that down the line we don't have to replace it. But there's so much more sonic information that the viewer needs, to understand what's happening in the scene and what's really important in the scene, and that's where Foley comes in, of course. And so um, I love Foley. I really do. It sort of adds this sort of like a legitimacy to the sets. Like, often, you know, the sets are plastic and you know, some sort of crappy wood, and they don't sound like what they should sound like in the context of the story. And so that whole layer of realism and sort of detail is so important for any production, I would say, but certainly for those higher concept productions where, you know, maybe you're on a ship, a wooden ship, maybe you're walking through ice and snow. You know, Rings of Power has so many different locations and surfaces. Our Foley team on this production specifically is outstanding. They've been nominated for multiple Emmys. Their work is some of the best in the world, and they're based here in Auckland. So you know, they're absolutely a vital cog in this team. And so, yeah, we couldn't have done it without them. Certainly, this Emmy Award nomination is a big part due to what they brought to the production as well.
Collaboration, the key to filmmaking as a whole, and in every department, it's something that people sometimes are not aware of how much effort it takes to deal with all the different frequencies and how they affect the score when you want to, you know, match the tempo, or all these things that you have to do sometimes to negotiate, especially in the big productions. You know, there is so much sound going on, only so much available real estate, and you need to place and immerse the audience and make them feel, as you mentioned, sometimes it goes from something extremely realistic, and sometimes you can get subjective and abstract and creative with the sound, which is another obstacle into itself, another challenge. But when you mention all this, and you know, my mind is just blown thinking of the great effort, Herculean effort that you put into this. I wonder how you approach these different projects and these different facets of it. So the realism, which is incredible, and it's very difficult to achieve when it's something is so done this way. And on the other hand, the subjective part of it, if you want to talk a little bit about that as well.
Certainly on Rings of Power, it was really all about the time. So my supervising partner Robbie Stambler and we started at the very start of the shooting. So we were actually on that production for 2.5 years, which is a long time for anyone to be on a single
Right.
show. But the idea with that was we knew how huge this show was. We were standing at the foot of a mountain, and going, how do we get there? But so collaboration was the key, right? So we would they would be shooting scenes, and it would go straight into like picture editorial, and then they'd start assembling and they'd start putting together specific scenes, and then when the picture editor was satisfied with where we're at, and then the showrunners would sort of sign off on a sequence, they would then turn that over to us, and we would start just building. We would build the ambiences, and so and then and the sound effects, and sort of start pitching ideas for sound design moments, and what's the stranger magic going to sound like? What's this scene going to be? And then basically we would send those sounds back to the picture editor, and they would
Mm-hmm.
put that into their Avid sequence, and then they would play that to the showrunner, or they would then cut that again and rearrange stuff, and it was just sort of constant sort of iteration of feedback, and we would adjust what we do, and then we'd get a completely new sequence from someone else, from another picture editor, because there were multiple episodes getting cut at the same time. So it was just this. It sort of sounds a little bit messy, but it was really quite a natural process. When one team was happy with something on one episode, they would then turn it over, and then we would be finishing off something for another team at the same time, and so it was just a really nice collaboration. But having said that, COVID came in and sort of broke up the team for a little while,
Mm-hmm.
and that sort of with that effect, that sort of slowed that process down a little bit. So we would still be getting these sequences and longer strips of the show, but we wouldn't be going back and forth as much. But it's really about breaking up every episode into sequences, and then putting it on the shelf, and then going on to another little bit, and then by about a year in, or a little bit less than a year in, then we started to get basically whole episodes turned over to us, and then we were able to assemble all of those bits, and then take a step back and go, hang on, that one's not quite working.
Mm-hmm.
We need to think about that, something else, because of how it plays out in the next episode, and then really just sort of massaging all of that stuff. There weren't any real big rebuilds, but it was just, this show was unique because it allowed us to do that. It was the budget was big, so we were able to spend time revising and revising and revising, and then by the time we got to the mix, which was the final 6 months, the whole season had a shape to it, and then our mixers, Bo Borders and Lindsay Alvarez, could really just hone in and shape all of those scenes. And then Bear's score came in, and that was just amazing, but then
Mm-hmm.
also quite complicated, because there was the way that he had written all of the music, it was so thematic. So every lead had a little motif that had to thread its way through. Some parts where we would want to play the sound effects louder than the music, we couldn't, because there was a melody that had to resolve, and so it was a real push and pull between the sound effects and the music, but also all the dialogue had to be heard crystal clear. So that's a credit to our mixers. They did an incredible job of, because we delivered so much to the mix stage, and Bear did as well, and the dialogue supervisor Stephanie Ung had all of the ADR and the production sound. It was a very full mix, and yeah, all credit to our mixers. They did an incredible job.
And that's on your end, such an amazing work. But now you're also working with this visual team and this amazing composer, as you mentioned, who has his own ideas, the themes for each character, for his feelings about the scene, as well as the directors and producers. How do you negotiate that when with what you just mentioned, all the requirements of the volume, or and sometimes do you have enough freedom to say, look, this sound is really key and we're gonna localize it in this, in this frequency, so that you can have both ways.
Yeah, I mean, we were fortunate. We had a lot of time with the mix, so we would
Mm-hmm.
actually do regular reviews. So we would do a review with just the sound team, and then we would review with our producer, our local producer, and with Bear as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we would have a pass of it without Bear, just of his
Mm-hmm.
music, and we would pull it and push it and make decisions on the stage that we thought would work, and then Bear would feed back on that, and that example that I made earlier around, maybe a theme not resolving,
Mm-hmm.
so it was that. After a couple of episodes, we would start to take a lot of that in consideration before that pass with Bear, or that the feedback with Bear. So it's really just about being sensitive to the music, um,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and not having any ego attached to the sound effects and anything in particular, really, because when you think about Lord of the Rings, you do think a lot about the music as well.
Right.
That the Howard Shore scores from the original films was so iconic, and
Mm-hmm.
and I think the essence, the feeling of that music has been carried forward by Bear as well. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
think there's a lot of homage paid to those original films throughout the soundtrack. From the treatment of the orc voices. To the sound design of the warg and the troll, the vocals, and then the score. So we're all sort of standing on the shoulders of giants. Those original films were so good. They sort of set a benchmark for
Mm-hmm.
what
Mm-hmm.
fantasy should sound like
Mm-hmm.
on the screen. So we it's definitely something that Robbie and I talked about a lot. How much to reference that, but also how much we should bring new stuff to it. Like, and so, because we didn't want to be just like a copy of those original films, and that actually came as a bit of a direction from our showrunners, actually, from the very top. Like, um, they wanted to do something different, but with respect to the original films being paid. So I think we got there in the end. It's a big ask, to get to that point where the original films were, and then take it somewhere different. And I think that comes from the collaboration, that comes from the push and pull between sound effects and music. And I think as a crew, the broader crew, including the editorial and the visual effects team, we were all driving towards that idea of, like, the standard that was set with the original films, and bringing something a little bit fresh, something new, because it's a new age in Middle Earth. It's something that hasn't been seen before. So it was a great opportunity to do that, and I hope the fans have enjoyed it as much as we have.
Certainly, and I agree that the audiences, such as myself, were expecting to be put back into the familiar world, in a sense. And I think that the particular challenge of negotiating, establishing the world, making it feel like it's somewhere where we've been, in a sense, but seeing it at a different time and seeing different aspects or angles to it, has been achieved greatly. I know fans are very grateful for everything that you've all done, to bring this world to life. It's been really impressive. It's really
Oh,
it,
that's
and
awesome. I mean, that's all we could ask for, Like, that's really, it was always sort of a topic of conversation. It was always something we were discussing and hoping we were achieving along the way. So to hear you say that, it's yeah, makes me very happy. That's great.
Yeah, and we can geek out about many aspects of how you build it together, and how you put layers into each sound, and how you. But what's incredible to me is that all you do, all that effort, is sometimes so that people don't notice it and are just living the moment. And I just want our audience to know that you are able to enjoy that moment so truthfully, thanks to all the hard technical and artistic work that that people are making in the streaming series is amazing, really.
Yeah, this crew was huge. This was a very large production. So there's probably 2,000 people
Mhm.
on the crew. Like that was it's probably beyond that with the visual effects vendors as well all around the world. So um, we had great leadership. We had a couple of showrunners who loved Tolkien's world. They were relatively young as well, and were sort of learning what what Tolkien's world was on screen as they were creating it. So, but then the producers, our post production producer, our post supervisor, uh, we felt empowered really
Mhm. Mhm.
to go for it, and that's just such a treat.
Of
You
course.
know,
Yeah.
it was, yeah, it was as a creative, there's nothing better than having someone uh, hand you the keys to the car and say,
Exactly.
"We want you to do what you do and drive the car," yeah, it's a memory. This show. I mean, 2.5 years is a long time for anyone.
Mhm. Mhm.
But this show will have a special memory for me
Mhm.
for the rest of my career for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I know
Yeah.
from other huge projects, that sometimes you become immersed in the process day to day of making the day, getting everything you need to do right. But how did it feel for you, if you've been obviously familiar with the book, obviously books, obviously familiar with Peter Jackson's work, amazing work, and not also like the social, like everything it did for New Zealand as an economy and as a filmmaking hub that it is in so many ways. How does it make you feel to go from appreciating that art and being part of it and working so hard for so long, and now watching it and hearing it, when you can see an entire season and being nominated for it?
It is quite a journey. Yeah. I mean, so I sort of did I one of the reasons, well, the original films were one of the inspirations for me to get into the industry 20 years ago. And so
Mhm.
over the years, so I was actually living and working in Wellington. I'd moved to Wellington to actually work with a lot of the sound team from the original films. I was working,
Mhm.
at Park Road Post, Peter Jackson's facility, where that last film was
Mhm.
mixed. And so for me, when I was offered the role, it was a real responsibility that I felt. Um, I mean, apart from the excitement of actually being part of the legacy of Middle Earth on screen, it was I felt a responsibility to do as best as I could to carry the torch, and down to the fact that I had a wiki page which was TolkienGateway.net. I had it open on my laptop for pretty much 2.5 years, and I was
Mhm.
always doing research whenever new sequences would come. I'd recognize names and I'd be like, oh, but I don't know who this one is, and I'd look and I'd read up on the canon, and try and understand how we could support that, and even try and tell a little bit more story that hasn't been told in the show. And so to get to the end of the production and have as much of that in there, and then to have the reaction from the fans and the audiences in general, and to have a nomination as a result of that work is just, it's a dream. It really is. It's almost like a full circle,
Right.
from when I started in the career to where I am now. I just there's nothing more that I could have asked for, really. It's unreal. Yeah.
That's fantastic. We're so happy for you, Damian. I'm really, truly happy, and to share this time with you. Thank you for everything that you've been so kind to share with us today. It's so much knowledge and a great insight. So we very much appreciate it. And I just want to thank you and wish you best of luck with that and keep up the amazing work, my man.
Oh, thank you so much, Andres. And yeah, good luck to all your viewers and your subscribers. Yeah, there is so much that you can do now with the
Mhm.
tools that are out there. The only real barrier is your creativity, and yeah, I encourage everyone to go out and make cool stuff.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
See you.